Good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management Webinar Series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen and I am the Program Manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. We would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series, and Lisa Ruggiero and Laura Flagg of the National Recycling Coalition for assisting the RMC with webinar promotion and technical support. Today's webinar focuses on wood recovery and recycling. Our presenter today is Dave Zwicky, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Dave Zwicky is the founder and president of W.D. Zwicky & Son. Dave started his family business located initially in Robesonia, Pennsylvania at the age of 14. His father co-signed a loan for him to buy a backhoe to use for excavating agricultural land conservation structures. Over time, he built a business moving from one opportunity into another. Excavating became land clearing. Land clearing led to stump grinding. Stump grinding led to mulch production. Demolition work led to processing and demolition of materials. Processing of demolition materials led to materials reclamation, and ultimately the current production of a variety of beneficial use and second life products, including biomass fuels. The family business is now 3 generations old and includes Dave's son and grandson. The W.D. Zwicky & Son Inc. and Zwicky Processing and Recycling Inc. operations continue to be involved in many of these aforementioned activities. Today, it's primarily a materials recovery facility that is located in Fleetwood, Pennsylvania. Dave's involvement in the community includes serving 14 years as board president for his local school district. And Dave also serves on a variety of state and local organizations related to the recycling industry. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Dave.
Welcome, and hopefully we can enlighten you in some of our ideas and some of the technology that we may use to try and make a better world for all of us to live in. Our whole focus is basically on recycling today for a better tomorrow, and we try to be very creative in what we do. The picture in front of you shows our facility in Maiden Creek Township, Berks County. It's about 141 acres that we have there. It's set up to be environmentally secure as far as being able to not only monitor what goes on the site, but also to give us the ability to control what goes on at the site and also to control our environment around us, that we're not impacting anybody in a negative way. If we would go and look at the next slide, it shows some of our site advantages. And site advantages for us look at things that make it not only convenient for us, but also friendly to our neighbors and the surroundings. The location is convenient to the highway system, and actually by road within a 10-hour area, we're able to meet 1/3 of the nation's population's needs. We have an easy on-site trucking access and egress, and we're offload friendly. That meaning that all our materials are offloaded on a solid, either blacktop or concrete, so that we don't have to be concerned about, again, things like mud and impacting our neighbors with stones and mud and so forth on the road. Our zoning is proper. It's a zoned industrial. That includes the whole property at this point. Isolated from our residential properties is very important to us. If we would look back at the prior slide, if you look behind us, you'll see what is part of Lake Onalani, and that's on the backside of us. There's a fair amount of land behind us also, and to the right that belongs to Lake Onaloni and the Water Authority. So we're very conscious of that. To the left of the property, as you're looking at there, we're adjacent to Lehigh Cement, which gives us a very good buffer in between there as another industrial application. The property on primarily our east side is some residential property, which we have a good buffer between them and us with the size of our property. So we don't impact our neighbors that way. And it became very important because if you can't get along with your neighbors, life is not very easy to get along. It makes a big difference. We're very conscious of what goes on in our surrounding community. We try to be active in our community. We try and do as much local support of our community by buying local, employing local people, and keeping the site friendly in that respect. We have adequate area for expansion and adequate area to control and stockpile materials. We have actually no environmental discharge. All our environmental activities are controlled. The site, all the water is captured and recycled. It's either recycled back through some of our needs for the production or into the compost areas to utilize to make the compost. We have up gradient and down gradient monitoring wells, and then each area also has a holding pond system, which are made up of lined ponds, mostly natural liners, very little synthetic liner used. Those ponds and those monitoring wells are all tested, and those results are shared with DEP through our permit and through that permit processing. The potential for dust discharge from the site is minimal because of our location and the way we try and do our operations to control that dust. Some of the things we do within the buildings and stuff is through high pressure misting systems to help settle that dust, because there is always some dust when you're handling these kinds of products. The noise that we generate, being backup alarms or the sound of the grinders or trucks moving and so forth and so on, because of our size of our lot and our site and the location of most of the activities, by any time any noise would leave the site, it is primarily well below the decimal point or decimal rating that is required. Adjacent storage for finished products, or I'm sorry, adequate storage for finished products is, I mean, as you can see, we've got quite a few buildings there, and with our industrial zoning, we have the ability to create more buildings because we're not going to impact our zoning permit. We have additional space to increase our storage build, as we need, if we needed to build up, and an ability to operate because of our location and because of the zoning. We can operate 724s. So that gives the ability for us to maintain our operations and meet our customers' needs. We have a 10-year permit, which right now is in the process of being renewed. We were on this particular site since 2001 and have moved through the permitting process. And as we started out, we originally started out making mulch and compost, and then we went into a general permit for the activities of recycling the different materials, municipal waste and residual waste materials. So our permit now does allow us to accept municipal waste, which construction and demolition materials fall under the heading of municipal waste. So, and we were primarily looking at wood products as one of our main focuses in there. Residual waste, of course, is anything that comes out of a manufacturing setting, and there are some manufacturing activities that generate a lot of wood waste, and there are also some other manufacturing activities that present themselves well to be recycled through our usage. The process is a de-wasting process under our permit, and everything is then has a determination for beneficial use. which is very important to us, and it's also important to a lot of our customers because it kind of stops the chain on where it goes and on the third-party involvement later on. When the material comes into our site, we take ownership of it and we handle it. We handle it in a very responsible way. Everything is manifested coming in, everything is manifested going out, and it gives us a really good advantage, especially for some of our utility customers. The permit that we have is a flow-through type permit, and it gives us basically unlimited tonnage capacity. And we designed the permit that way simply because we knew what we wanted to do was to be able to give a sustainable fuel supply for most of our customers, because the biggest part of our activities there is making engineered fuel for third-party use. By doing that with a flow control, we were allowed to stockpile materials as they were available, and then as they're needed, we would always have a sustainable end product available for our end users. Right now, we're at a 96-97% landfill diversion rate, which is also third-party certified. And of that 96 or 97%, 88% of it qualifies under LEED certification, primarily for the C&D materials through the third-party certification also. The DEP beneficial use determination is for our end products, and it just gives us the ability then to move those end products into several different avenues. At this point in time right now, there are basically 35 different products leaving the site that all fall under the beneficial use. So we have been pretty creative in making things out of what you might want to call your waste. We don't like the word waste. For us, it's a commodity, and we'd like to turn it into a better product. Quality control processes are on site, and testing is also on site. We do get everything third-party verified to meet the specs for our end products for our different end users. We have flexibility in the end products because of the variety of users that we have. We have the unique ability within our system there and the way we're set up to meet the needs of most all of our clients. What we do when we want to start a product or have a new client, especially on the fuel end of it for the engineered fuel, we will do a site visit with them. We will look at the type of application they want to use it in, their feed systems. It's very important to look at their air permits and some of their permitting requirements so that we can engineer that fuel to meet them. Some of the things that we look at primarily are BTU value. We look at ash content. We look at moisture. The sizing becomes very important. And then you look also things like chlorines and sulfurs and the leads and mercuries and all those other things that come with some of our natural fuels. So we go through all that with our clients as we build a program for them. Our permit does not restrict on anything on our operation or our production, as it's laid out the way it is as a processing operation or a processing permit. We have minimal restriction on acceptable materials for us or raw materials, and that works well for us, and we use that sometimes to our advantage because there's some things you really don't want to deal with. And as you get involved in recycling, you'll realize more and more of those things have opportunities, but you need to be able to have a good outlet for them to make it even worth the effort. We have a very good established presence in the C&D market. With our location, we can reach out into several of the surrounding states to utilize them. Our permit also allows materials to come into us from other states or other areas where they might have flow control or something, and they need the beneficial use determination, or what they might call a BUDS, to move it out of their restricted areas. We also have a good established presence, like with utility companies, and the manufacturing market, and we have a leading presence in the recycling biomass area. Our main product that we do make right now is the engineered fuel, and currently we make 7 different varieties for different end users. Some of the other advantages that we feel we have is our equipment. We are kind of unique in some of the things we do. We do an awful lot of utility poles and railroad ties for the utility market. If you look at the picture there, that setup is one of our processes where we do primarily utility poles through there. And that operation there, we have the capability of doing between 250 and 300 ton an hour of telephone poles turned into a finished material of about 1.5 inches in size with the balances that we need for the end users. We have both, mechanical and manual separation in part of our operation. As we go through, we'll see some other photos of different areas. We have a pre-sort capacity for larger items because we find things like the gypsum board, the heavier pieces of concrete and metal and stuff like that is a much bigger advantage to get it out early, especially things like gypsum board. You run a piece of gypsum board or a load of C&D material with a high volume of gypsum in through a primary grinder, and instead of having a half a dozen 4x8 sheets, now you have about 500 pieces to pick up for each one of those sheets. So it's not very practical at that point to get it out. We do have a very large tipping receiving building, and we have a large tipping area, which goes back to being us friendly for unloading for the trucks coming in, because they're on a paved area. The area is easy to keep clean. They don't have to be concerned about, tire problems or getting stuck or being pushed or pulled. We have, in our equipment area, we have a climate controlled utility room for all our electrical controls and also for some of our monitoring equipment. We have a continuum mechanically handling from our tipping floor right on through our finished building in the area that does the C&D. We have the dust control via misting systems through the whole total processing area and in the storage area. The secondary process line capabilities is for pre-sorted materials, sort of like the utility poles or the clean pre-sorted wood that comes in, or some of the other products that come in, especially from some of the residual materials that come in, meaning they come from a manufacturing setup. They may come in gaylords and they're all pretty much sorted already, so it saves us a lot of handling. The third processing line is for large bulky materials, which is what you're looking at there, which is the utility poles and railroad ties. We have in-house, and we're quite proud of this, we have an exceptional preventive maintenance program with a lot of really good dedicated employees who have quite a few good skill sets to make our equipment and keep our equipment at a better than 97% uptime, which is important when you maybe have the processing line and there's 30 people involved in working the material through that line, and on a 10-hour day you're going to get better than 9.5 hours of runtime on there, and normally the only downtime you have is when you need to do a clean or get a piece of equipment back into balance, not a replacement or repair. We have a large site inventory of on-site replacement parts for our equipment. We have a large fleet backup of replacement equipment, meaning not just parts, but we also have multiple machines. Right now we have 22 different grinders, being electrical and some diesel driven, and slow speeds, high speeds, horizontals, tub grinders, in place V mills. So if we need to duplicate a line or we have a problem with a line, for us it's a matter of a half a day and we can have alternate lines set up, and we can keep on going. So that way we, again, meet our needs of our customers, and also it controls our incoming material. We have our own on-site fabrication shop, our own machine shop, our own maintenance garage area with mechanics. And our mechanics are really, we're quite proud of them, and they're really good guys. They are able to service everything, but not only just service it, repair it, or if we don't quite have the machine we want, we'll just turn around and customize it and redesign it to make it meet our needs. We also have a pretty good group of mobile processing equipment available for off-site customer service. We do some industrial places. We do some work at some landfills. We do service some of the military places. We do things like service the hydroelectric plants with their recycling of the materials they skim off the rivers and stuff, and turn that back into a positive flow of either more fuel or composted material. We right now, the way we're set up with a 10-hour, 5-day per week finished product capabilities of about 1,400 to 1,500 tons per day, and that can be modified and increased. And with the ability that we have to go to working 724s if we need to, if the need is there, we would have the ability to continue to service our customers. This is a picture of our incoming area where the transfer trailers or the roll-offs or the dump truck or whatever comes in. They come across our scale. Our scales are kind of hooked up like you have your bank with the vac tube for the paperwork. It all goes in. There's communication between the scale master and the driver. At that point, we can tell them exactly which area they need to go to. And as they go through and offload, when they come back, the scale system is just reversed on the other side, so they have the ability to pick up their paperwork and carry their manifests in and out with them. And it gives us really good control. It's the only access point on the site that is set up on a regular basis. We do have a secondary emergency exit area, but normally everything comes through this main gate and across the scale. It gives us very good control of what goes on in the yard as far as anybody coming in or anything going on. This is just another shot of the scale coming in. We are set up to be a support unit for not only our end customers, but also for our generators. We don't specifically have any set program as to who supplies us. If Waste Management wants to come in, that's fine. If a local hauler wants to come in, that's fine. If it comes from a transfer station, if it comes from right off the generator's pad, it's all acceptable that we work with them. We can handle all that, and we try and build our programs so that they are win-win programs. Not only do the generator or the material win, but the transporter or the trash handler or whatever you want to call them, they have a good service to their customer. And then on the back end of that, hopefully we have the materials we need to give service to our customer. And it's pretty proud of the way we set up. I mean, as you can see a little bit in the background there, there's aggregate comes in, that gets recycled. There's some yard waste right to the right of the back of the truck there. That gets cleaned up and processed and composted. A little bit off in the distance, you can see some stockpiles and some structure there. Right now, with the price of the metals, we've been stockpiling a lot of it. We have the advantage of having a lot of room to be able to do that. So hopefully the market comes back not only in scrap metal, but plastics and all the other recycled. I know each of us have our areas. This is a picture of the tipping area for the C&D material. As you see, it's all on hard surface. It's in an area, that area is also controlled by its own watershed. All that water goes into a retention area. So anything that would happen to be on there that might be a negative into a leachate is caught, captured, and we have the ability to handle it properly. We have people on site as it comes into that tipping area, where again, like I said, we do some pre-sort. We use a lot of excavators in our operation because of handling bigger things and trying to be more friendly to our laborers, and we don't need any workman's comp claims. We need active, healthy laborers. You see it comes in, it's kind of commingled. It doesn't really look pretty, but it doesn't have to look pretty to be useful. This is a picture of the area where it goes into the tipping building. If you look to the left, there's some materials that are set out that would go to the landfill. That's basically 3%. Some of a part of that there, things like fiberglass insulation and some of the items that are high in chlorines will wind up going into landfill just because they're really not, they're recyclable, but they're not practical. If you see the pile there is pretty much a mix of whatever, and that's how it comes into us. Most of that already has been gone through by hand just to pull out primarily chips and larger pieces of concrete and some of the larger metal items. The next picture shows a excavator with a grapple on it feeding a slow speed grinder, which again, this is a Zwicky made slow speed grinder in cooperation with Morbark and Wynn, Michigan. Very effective piece of machinery. Very slow speed, real high torque, and pretty much you could run a car through that if you wanted to, or we've already had things in there you didn't want in there, but like a 2-inch manhole cover did not phase it. So we're kind of proud of that machine. From there, it goes by conveyor belt out of that building up into our what is called our B3 processing building. The next slide will show some of the activities in there. When it comes by that conveyor, it comes into that through the wall there a little bit to the right onto a taper slot screening operation, which drops at this point is dropping everything 1 foot and larger stays on top, and everything smaller than 1 foot falls through the slots, follows the conveyor, and you see a conveyor heading back a little bit to the left there, heading to the back again. That carries it up and drops it into a slide that goes into that trommel screen there. And this is all your material that's basically 1 foot or less in size. The trommel screen is then used to sort out some of the aggregates, some of the heavies, and some of the negative fines that are in there. And it works pretty well for us. It does a good separation. We lose a lot of that styrofoam popcorn and the little pieces of drywall and things like that that aren't really practical to handle further. That fine material that comes out of there, we'll probably see a little picture of it here a little later on. It goes into an alternate daily cover application. But what's left on there now goes up onto the sorting line. The first thing on the sorting line is on the fine side of it, it goes to a destoner or densot, which there again separates the stones, some of the pieces of metal, some of the heavier items go one way. There's a vac on that system there that pulls out some more of the fine dust in that, which is captured in the bag house. And we actually have a process where we recycle all that dust back into a filtering medium and an absorbent medium. At that point in time, when it comes out of there, the laborers do look through there. They're looking for things like aluminum cans and some pieces of vinyl and stuff like that. We do what is called a negative pick. So we pick out the items that we don't want in our end product, which in our case means that's a very small percentage of what we're picking out. To make the alternate fuels that come out of this particular setup is a hog fuel that goes into a biomass burner, which is pretty tolerant. And as long as we keep within a certain BTU range and control our chlorines and sulfurs and stuff, we are we're pretty happy with that product. This is just a picture of that area where those pickers were standing in. These are the bins underneath. As you saw in the previous slide, there's each of the pickers may be standing aside of a pit or a kind of a box there where they drop items into the pit. There's also some magnetic separators up there that throw metal down into these pits also, so that they're taken care of. The stones come out into one pit to the far right here. The scrap metal comes into the second pit. The pit with the roll-off box in it is where they're dropping right now the vinyl siding and that kind of stuff, which gets out and gets recycled. Where the little dump truck's sitting in, the rocks get dropped down in there, and then those rocks get hauled out and stockpiled, and then we primarily wind up crushing them and turning them into aggregate, which in most cases, as we keep growing, we've been able to utilize almost all the aggregate on site, but it would be a sellable product if it need be. This is a picture of some of the finished material that conveys right from that system over into our fuel storage building, which is there again, it's all part of the mechanically carrying it through. We do not handle it from the time it hits the tipping floor until it gets into the storage area for the finished fuel. We don't handle it with any equipment other than the conveyor belts and that system. Hopefully it helps us streamline it and makes us more efficient that way. This is inside the storage building. We have the capabilities within the storage building to load the outgoing material in primarily 99.9% of it goes out in live bottom trailers in bulk. And this way we can there again control the dust. We also gives us good control of our contaminants, dust and plastic and so forth and so on going around the site. So we try and keep the site presentable. I think we do a pretty good job. We're pretty proud of the way it looks, and all our employees are pretty responsible. If they see a piece of plastic floating around, it's not very uncommon that they will stop and pick it up, because that's the way they look at it, and they're proud of where they work. They're proud of what they're doing. This is some of the sorted out materials. This gypsum board is sorted out. It goes to a recycler here in Pennsylvania, who probably most of you are familiar with. That's US Gypsum. And from there it gets turned into several products that Terry makes with it. It's a very good relationship for us, and we're quite pleased with what he does with it, because it carries on a very positive activity with the material. This is some of what we get off the magnets. This is primarily nails in there. On a good given day, when we're processing, we probably generate just in nails and some of that lighter hardware about 14, 15 tons of metal. Unfortunately, the market's not real good, but we'll just live through it. We'll work through it. We do bale the cardboards, and we do also bale the vinyls. The other plastics that we don't get a whole lot of other plastics. We're not quite set up as a MRF, so in the construction area, it doesn't always come in too much plastic, which most of it can be utilized in the fuel blend. This is a shot of the fines coming out of that first trommel screen, which goes into the daily cover. It's available for a couple different end users, and it is all approved for DEP as a beneficial use. It meets all the criteria for the combustibles and so forth and so on. The way we sort out our gypsum in the front end was a big help in helping us to keep the daily cover to the point where it's not high in sulfur, that it does impact the odor control for the landfill. So they're pleased with that. This is just a picture of some of our utility poles. We do, like I said, we do have a really good relationship with almost all the utility companies on the East Coast here. And for us, right now, I think we're getting close to 700 or 800 ton of utility poles in a week on an average steady basis. And it became a very important part of our fuel mix. It has a good BTU. It's actually very positive as far as contaminants like mercuries, leads, and all that. They're almost non-existent. The only thing we have to watch is the balance. Some of them have chlorines in them, depending on what their treatment is. So, this is just another shot of poles being offloaded. All their materials do come in from by third-party carriers through their relationship with the generators. And there again, you can see that we're friendly to the trucks. We keep an area open for them. They can work on a flat, stable surface. They don't have to worry about mud and dragging contaminants out along with them when they leave the site. This is just a shot of railroad ties. We are currently getting railroad ties in by truck, but at this point in time, we have now arranged for a rail siding, and we will be able to better serve the rail industry. And there again, for us, that's a very good product. It makes a really nice fuel material, and it comes out as a very good beneficial use. The metal and stuff on them is not really a concern to us. Here again, we're back to the processing area where we do the large items, which again was the ties and poles. So this is a shot of the actually the retention pond there is kind of put its way back into a natural wetlands, which Mother Nature is a lot smarter than we are when it comes to cleaning up some of that stuff. So you'll see cat o' nine tails there and some of the normal vegetation that goes with it. Those ponds are tested on a regular basis. The ponds are also set up that if we would have a hit, that they can be cleaned out and that material can all be recycled. So it's working out quite well for us. And in our basically 10 years of operation there now with these kind of materials that we've been monitoring, we have not had any negative hits on any of our water testing. So we're real pleased with that. This is a storage area for some of the pre-sorted materials, pallets and that kind of stuff that comes in. There again, they go into some different products. Some of that can go into fuel, some of it go into base material for culling chips. When you find that like greenhouses have to have a little bit different BTU value and a different ash component and stuff, pallets make a really good area for that. That could be potentially used into wood stove pellets, or there's several outlets for that. That's a good product for us. There again is some of the pre-sorted. Now this is primarily construction materials, so there's press board and plywood and whatever else in there. Or you'll see some items with the blue paint on them and stuff, which is a non-lead paint. But that goes in again through the fuel to be utilized. If you look a little bit, you'll see the bag house there behind building 3, which was the one on the den side or the de-stoner in the previous picture there. That material that goes in there is captured, and then that material comes back out of there, and we utilize that as a part of our absorbent material that we make for the people that do cleanups for fuel spills and tank cleanouts and stuff like that. We have developed a bit of a product that has some very good wicking activities going on, not just absorbing, but wicking. And it does make a really good use for that. And we do have the capabilities too to bring some of that material back in and there again recycle it, capturing the BTU values of that and knowing what went into gathering it up. There's some testing that they do for us on that. Here again is just another shot of one of our overflow areas. We do bring in a lot of material that doesn't go out the same day, that's for sure. But we're year-round sustainable then to our end users. This is just a first run material, primarily pallet wood. Some of that actually came from some of our outside customers where we do some of the industrial cleanups. So I think that particular pile actually came from Fort Uniontown Gap on one of their cleanups. There again is just some more shots of that. That is one of our outside lines where we do a pre-sorted material. The setup on that line is in a way right now that we can do 3 different products at one time, primarily by sizing and elimination of some of the negatives. Every one of our setups has magnets, head pulleys, cross belts, just different varieties of magnets in there. We work very hard on getting the metals out. This is just a clean fuel in one of the storage buildings. This is just primarily made out of this particular pallet is made out of primarily the telephone poles, and that's good fuel for some of our higher BTU users. We do the stumps and the land clearing debris and on a separate side of the property there. That material gets cleaned up. The stumps and the wood material, of course, get processed and go into mulch products. The fines and the dirty stuff gets composted and then gets further refined into either compost or into soils and soil additives. So very little of that goes back out. Any rocks or stuff that are in there also get, separated out and utilized. You see that piece of plastic or two, they also come out in the screening process, and they will eventually wind up back into an end use. It's just another picture of an area. This is a primary grind going on the brush and some stumps in that. It's another shot of that material which gets refined. We have the capability not only just wholesaling that, but we can also take it to a finished product, or we can screen it and separate out for different materials that might get utilized for some of the special environmental needs. This picture of some of the finished mulches and just an overview of some of the stockpile area and the work area for the yard waste in those mulch materials. We did mention early on that we are third-party certified, that 96% of our waste is diverted from landfills. That is, we work pretty hard to do that. We're quite proud of that, and we work hard to maintain that. Actually, our goal is to go to 99.9%, and we will make it one day. We have third-party verification at 88% for LEED certification, and that is also a big part of what we do. We do service that. We have different ways of handling that depending on how the generator handles it. We can track it through and give them the information that they need to get their certification. The LEED certification and the landfill diversion are a little bit separate there, because there are certain things that LEED doesn't recognize as being utilized, even though it doesn't go into a landfill. It doesn't go in as a waste product. Some of that might even be your all-in daily cover is one of the bigger items that's not certified for LEEDs. But it's not that it's not being landfill, it's just being used in a different application. So I guess that kind of gets us to the end of the presentation. So hopefully I didn't bore you.
All right, thank you, Dave. Excellent presentation. We're now going to field some questions for our presenter. Again, if you have a question, please enter them on the GoToWebinar dialog box on your screen. So we already do have a few questions. Let me pull them up here quick. The question is, are there any rebates available for certain types of wood waste if volume warrants it? If so, what types and how much? Is there a wood market publication that determines market pricing? So I guess the question is, do you pay for incoming wood or materials?
No, we do not pay for incoming materials. We work on a tipping fee to offset our costs. This is one of the things that we need to work with United on the Recycling Market Center, and the wood recycling end of it is to generate more end users, so we generate more volume, or more value, I would say. I'm not aware of anything that we do right now that we have chased any of the rec or any of that kind of credits on. I'm still a little bit of a stubborn Dutchman, and I don't like to get too much government control in my programs.
This question asks, what do you do with the materials that aren't accepted? I guess the rejects, and once they are accepted, there are some residue materials. What do you do with those?
Well, like we said, we do have a 97% plus recycling program. There's very little in there that we can't do something with. The ones like we showed a little earlier on where we had that set aside area for things that go into the landfill, were items like some of the items like the PVC pipe has a very low sales value or very low demand for it. Fiberglass insulation is hard to recycle. It usually comes in, by the time it gets to us, it's pretty dirty. Another one of the other things that we try not to accept, but we do get them, is mattresses and things like that. There is some value in them, but we have a little bit of a program going there that we will not ask our people that work for us to do something that I wouldn't be comfortable doing all day long. And if you ever accepted mattresses, you know why I'm saying that. You know, there is ways mechanics can do them, but they're also, they're not worth the effort in most cases. We do have to pull out some of the things, like pull out lead contaminated wood. Some of that, if it's properly handled, can go through a smelter and the lead can be captured. The volumes of lead that we get in, or lead tainted wood, is minimal. So most of that really just winds up right now back in the landfill, just because of the cost of handling it and the logistics that go with it.
So you can monitor incoming loads, like for lead. You have portable equipment.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit of that more? What kind of equipment do you have to monitor?
We do have the electronic handheld equipment that we can monitor, and we can pick out pretty much any kind of metal. We can separate, and it'll identify leads, it'll identify chlorines, it'll identify a lot of that kind of material. A large majority of our materials that come in, if they're coming off a demolition project anymore, because most of those projects have to have their abatements done up front, what comes into us has already been approved and comes out of a program where they already had done the 10-day certification on to verify that it was clean. If we get material from our residual customers, there again, as we take on new materials or new customers in that arena, they do mostly give us all their materials or all their MSDS sheets, and most of that comes in with a 26R certification also. So it's we do a lot of checking, we do a lot of scrutiny on projects, but the overall program is pretty friendly because of the cooperation from the generators. We try and stay away from what you might call the homeowner drop-offs, because there again, they have a different level of understanding of their responsibilities, where your trash haulers, your transfer stations, your industrial places, or your bigger contractors, it's important for them to keep their plate clean and do their end of the project properly. So it makes our project a little more feasible. And then also we have to test all our materials as they go out for our end users. So everything does go through a testing program.
Okay. How is your concrete recycled, and what do you use it for?
Right now, the concrete that comes into us is crushed on site, and we can utilize it on site, which we've been doing because we are progressively growing. So it's a very good underlay for your work areas and that, but it is also can go out as a beneficial use if needed to be.
Okay. This question I think we answered, but I'll add some to it. The question on gypsum wallboard. As Dave said, he sends that material to USA Gypsum in Pennsylvania, and he recycles that material back into an agricultural amendment. And we actually did a webinar on that, I believe, in October. So if you'd like to review that webinar, just go to our website and you can view that presentation. This question deals with financial assurances like bonding for your site.
Yes, we are bonded through our program with DEP, and part of our permit is bonded. And then also the site is all totally owned by one of the Zwicky groups, which is C&D Zwicky LLC, which owns the property. And that group is also insured and bonded with an environmental impact bonding and stuff.
Do you ever recover the pallets that only have minor damage, send them back for remanufacturing?
No, we don't do any sort out like that. Primarily, a lot of our pallets already come through recyclers, or if they're in industrial setup, they come into us that way. But for us, the handling doesn't warrant the recycling of that wood. Because for me, pallets are I could never get enough of them because they're a very good source of a bunch of different end products that we can make out of them.
This question asks for what are your percentages of your engineered fuel versus I'd say like mulch products, materials that aren't combusted versus.
I can. That's something that we actually have to turn that in as part of our activities with DEP. Basically, right now, about 74 to 75% goes into fuel. We have like 30.31% of it is in gypsum board. 0.40% goes into drywall. There's about 0.40% is metal. There's less than, well, it's about 9% vinyls and plastics that get sorted back on and sent out. We do some tire recycling. That also goes to a couple different outlets. That varies. It's usually less than 1/10 of 1%. Ag beddings we make, which are some of the fine products that we process, and that's one of the sidelines of pallet material. When you process it, you screen out the fines. It makes a very good absorbent for the farmers to utilize. That's about probably 0.22, about 0.22% of our material. Moisture absorbent material, which we kind of spoke a little bit about earlier on, is a little bit better than 10% of the material that goes out. The concrete block, brick, and that kind of stuff goes out as a clean fill product, and that's about 2.5%. And then the all in the daily cover is approximately 7% of what we generate. So that gives us our 97.22% of material. The balance of 2.78% is what goes into the landfill right now. And hopefully we can develop more products to even capture more of that in the future.
Have you ever handled any material that comes from a natural disaster?
Yes, we did. We had quite a bit of the material that came out of the storm Sandy. We were able to handle that. We have the capabilities of storage and backup on that. We had to do some special monitoring on that because the potential of some of the contaminants, some of the things you may not think about, but even when it came off the coast like that, being because of the saltwater contaminant in there, it pushes the sodium so high that it basically eliminates it from being a good fuel. And we do not take material like that and turn it into landscape products because we have a little more pride in what we do than that. But there are ways to handle it. You need to be a little bit cognizant of where it's coming from and what it is. We can handle materials out of fire and that kind of stuff. Usually if it's an industrial setting, we try and figure out or get a background on what the activities were on that site to know if that material is acceptable.
Okay. Do you do any glass recycling?
No, we got a very small amount of glass comes in there. What comes in there might be mixed within the loads, and primarily that winds up going back out in the daily cover because by the time it goes through our system, it's not much bigger than a 1/4 inch.
Now, you think you mentioned fuel pellets? You do any of that kind of?
No, we do not do anything with fuel pellets, simply because our volume allows us to do what we do, and we need to move volume. And personally, we'd like to stay a little bit away from the residential market as possible.
Speaking of that, can you accept non-friable asbestos such as floor tiles?
We can, but they normally get sorted out and wind up going back into the landfill because there's not really a decent market for them, and there's a lot of logistics that would go with them to even prove that they were non-pliable and that you were doing something positive with them. So they normally, and most of the demolition activities, of course, they're normally removed anyways.
Now this question says the contaminants in creosote and telephone poles do not cause any environmental issues with utilities that burn them.
No, they don't. I mean, especially if you look at the creosote material, it's a derivative of coal, and it actually is much cleaner than the coal you're burning. So it's a very good fuel. Of course, like I said earlier, also all of our products that we make into fuel have to coincide with whomever the end user's air permits are and their ash handling system and so forth. We do not put anything into incineration because we pride ourselves in making an engineered fuel that meets the needs and is a whole lot more beneficial that way than having utilized most of it to dry it up and then have 40% ash left over. We pretty much be able to capture almost all the ash up front. It can go into things like the daily cover. It can go into things like aggregates, depending on what the ash is itself.
What is your end market for your vinyl material?
The vinyl material is sold to a third party that basically does, their thing through it. So it'd be a group that is, permitted to do that.
Okay. It says here, your permit prohibits accepting chlorinated copper arsenic treated wood waste. How do you test for this incoming wood to be sure that this type of wood isn't accepted?
The wood does show up within our mix of materials from the utility companies, and we have a set-aside area for it. It's basically fairly easy to identify the CCA material because of the coloring, but we also have the electronic guns that we can separate that out, and we can determine the levels of arsenic and chlorine and copper that's in it. And then we do have a program that is approved with DEP to recycle that material into a beneficial use actually right now into the landfills for a work face stabilizer and replacing a stone and not used as a daily cover but as a stabilizing medium for the work face.
Here's an air quality question. How do the EPA boiler MACT emission standards affect the ability of your fuel customers to burn the dirtier fuels made from railroad ties and painted/treated wood? Do you sell the dirtier fuels to facilities permitted as waste incinerators?
No, we do not service any waste incinerators. Like I say, our materials are all engineered to balance out to meet whatever their air permit requires them to meet. And that includes sulfurs and all those other kind of things. We can balance that by blending different things and different qualities of materials.
Mm-hmm. Do you take any agricultural waste, such as corn stalks, for engineered fuels?
No, we do not use them. Basically, is you handle an awful lot of volume, you get tonnage of good BTUs that way.
I'm not sure if we can answer this question, but I'll ask it. Where can we find a report showing how compliance was met for third-party certified facilities per the requirements of the U.S. Green Building Council MRPC 87 pilot credit? I don't know if you know anything about that.
But it's a little bit on my realm, but I think the Circle Green people that certifies us would be able to answer that.
Yeah, you might be able to contact Green Circle Certified. They're the ones that did the third-party certification for this facility. What is your annual tonnage processed?
Annually, let's see.
You can go do your daily.
I can do daily a little easier. Our average daily incoming right now is about 650 tons. So that puts us around 3,500 tons a week on a 5.5 day week of acceptance. So we're in the 13 to 14,000 tons a month category there. And our outgoing right now is about 12,000 tons per month. The balance is good because we always want to have a stockpile, because one day the weather's going to get bad, one day this is going to happen, one day that's going to happen. But we're still operational and we're still producing for our end users. So on a yearly basis, we pretty much have it balanced out pretty good. We always have maybe a backlog of someplace in the neighborhood of 8 to 12% of material on site, but it's easy enough for us to recoup and keep on moving.
Okay, well, we're close to being out of time and we're out of questions. So thank you for those great questions to the audience. Those are really good, really engaging and interesting questions. So again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you, Dave, for this presentation. And we hope you'll join us for next month's webinar. Please visit the NRC and RMC websites for schedule updates. And have a great day, everybody.